Okay, we're going to take a look at you watched the first part of the video. We took the reforms in Great Britain. We're going to look at reforms in France during this time period. Now, you do know and understand that some of these reforms we've talked about before. So I'm going to review some of these as we go along here. Some of these will end up being reviewed. So get the notes that you need based on the blanks on your slide. Remember, talked about it numerous times, Congress of Vienna, the balance of power, restoring old monarchs, the conservatives, restoring the old monarchs and the old order in Europe. And of course, they do that by restoring Louis XVIII back to the Bourbon family, accepted the Constitution, constitutional monarchy, limiting his power, reforms made by the previous revolution. Some of those reforms were kept, and he dies in 1824. Moves on to Charles the Tenth, an absolute monarchy. Liberal reforms out the window, raise taxes to repay some of the nobles. So again, we're going back to the old ways in France. Outcome. Remember the cold that we talked about with Metternich, that he said once France gets a cold, that's what spread around the Revolution of 1830, and Charles, the 10th, is forced to give up his throne, and by the Revolution of 1830, the sneeze of France. He's Metternich, Prince Metternich of Austria, is worried that this is going to spread, right? And as well as the ones from 1848. Well, more changes. France is a bastion of changes. Louis Philippe is chosen to be citizen king after the revolution of Revolution in 1830. He calls himself a quote, citizen king. But he really is representing landowners with policy. You've got this group, the Bonapartists, and the Bonapartists are they opposed Louis Philippe and wanted to revive Napoleon's empire. Hence the Bonapartists, right? So. Okay. So I need to move ahead here. I apologize for that little delay. The Revolution of 1848. We've talked about this too. We talked about this in class a little bit. The Revolution of 1848 erupts after freedom of speech and is restricted. There's food shortages and unemployment. Remember that there was also a movement of socialists that were going on. Riots were taking place. This was even bigger than the Revolution of 1830. Louis Philippe is forced to abdicate the throne and flee to England, and then we establish a second French Republic. This is no king. That's the only time I ever had this. We had this under Napoleon too. Remember that there was a radical group of socialists that wanted to reform the political system. We talked a little bit about this before, but ultimately, what happens is that the Second French Republic is established. So under this, there's a Republican form of government, one term of president, a legislature where all males could vote, and these workshops that were created. So these workshops are a little more socialist. Well, it didn't last for very long. The socialists were kind of scaring people, and this one guy, we talked about this guy, and I'm going to bring up another slideshow here briefly. You don't have to get anything down from this. Blank demanding this Louis Blanc demanding new workshops, and he wanted to give jobs to the unemployed and have the government open them. Well, the government shut them back down, and then that's when these riots occurred. You don't have to get into all this detail, but that's really what the problem was. The socialists were trying to maintain some control, and it didn't really work. Ultimately, we come back to the nephew of Napoleon Bonaparte. Louis Napoleon is chosen as a president. So what happens is that his goal is to amend the Constitution so he can serve more than one term. Of course, he's going to try to gain more power. The National Assembly votes no on this, and he forms a coup d'etat to override the National Assembly. Remember who the National Assembly is? That legislative body in France. And the new vote approves the Constitution for 10 years. 10 years. Okay, so and ultimately, what happens is that by 1852, he declares himself the emperor, kind of like his uncle. He ends up ruling for 20 years, and by a vote, he declares himself emperor, and he gets and they what they basically do is they approve a constitution for 10 years, and ultimately allows himself to be declared emperor. Slowly, citizens start to lose basic rights. It starts to become looking more and more like a kingdom with authoritarian rule and domestic affairs. But the domestic affairs are stable, so he's able to maintain his authority for a while. Let's look a little bit at the foreign conflicts. The Crimean War. There's land disputes in Palestine between Russia and the Ottoman Empire, and France being involved as well. Um, who and when these alliances between France, Britain, and the Ottomans, and they declare war on Russia in 1884. Russia's defeated, and France gains some form of military glory over here in what would be Crimea. But again, there's a lot of loss of life. So this is France's overseas empire. We've done the work with Africa, and a lot of control West Africa, a little bit in the Suez Canal here, of course, France, and a little bit over here in South America, Madagascar, French Indonesia, which would continue until 1954. This is Vietnam, by the way. That's what this area is. So we've talked a little bit about the Franco-Prussian War. Prussia trying to unite all 39 German states. France was against this union. This is from the perspective of France. We've done this from the perspective of Germany. We're doing this a little bit from the perspective of France. Bismarck eggs on Louis Napoleon to declare war. This was with the telegram that he sends, and so Prussia invades France, and Paris falls, and the war ends, and this Treaty of Frankfurt is signed, forcing France to give up territory and pay reparations to Prussia. This is the part that they gain, the little Alsace-Lorraine that we talked about, that territory that would go back and forth from Germany back to France, back to Germany in World War II. So this third republic that's formed after the Prussia Paris falls to Germany is created a constitution that, and again, officially makes France a republic, a president with a 7-year term, two parties, conservatives, Republicans. And then finally, some reforms that do end up taking place in the late 1800s: trade unions, free education, coalitions form in government. So these are reforms that end up taking place in France, very similar to ones that you saw in Great Britain that we saw in the previous video. So France has a very tumultuous period. They go from kingdom to republic, back to another republic. Remember, the key thing to understand with France is they don't have a constitution that is like flexible like ours is. We can the United States can amend its constitution numerous times. France really can't do that. So therefore, there's a lot of upheaval and a lot of people trying to gain power. Ultimately, we'll look at some other things that force France to become unstable as we go along. Some anti-Semitic things with the Dreyfus affair, and we'll look at that as well a little bit in this particular mini unit. So obviously, you can stop this and replay this as many times as you need to gain what you need to as far as making notes.